And you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup's coverage of general election count here in Carlow, Kilkenny for 2024. We're now joined by Fianna Fáil MEP for Ireland South, Cynthia and Mhurchú. Cynthia, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup. Looks like Fianna Fáil are going to have a good day here in Carlow, Kilkenny.
Yes, it's looking like that, but you can never count your chickens before they're hatched.
Not.
That's for sure. And of course, there's been many an election where my dear colleague Jennifer Murnane O'Connor, one of the candidates here, who was told early on in 2016, I believe, that it was in the bag, so to speak. And then there was a late surge from Fine Gael. So, in the instant case now in 2024, it is looking very positive for Jennifer. It's looking very positive, obviously, for John McGuinness, who's at the moment top of the pile from Fianna Fáil. And it's looking positive for Peter Chapclear, our newest candidate. So, yeah, exciting night ahead. Nail-biting.
And you're a Carlow woman. If we were looking at the positions now at the moment, if it stayed the way it is, 3 of the 5 TDs would be from Carlow, which I'd say was probably a first in this constituency.
Yes, Carlow is eventually punching above its weight and saying we're fed up of Kilkenny and we don't want to be in the halfpenny place and in the shadow of Kilkenny. Maybe I started something myself when I ran in the European elections in March and then won the seat in June. And maybe County Carlow said, look, there's this woman from a really small county called Cynthia. She's after getting elected. We now have Jennifer Murnane O'Connor, who's an excellent sitting TD. We're going to get a Fine Gael candidate now, Catherine O'Callaghan, who is an excellent candidate as well, and we want to see a woman from Carlow running. And then we have a Sinn Féin lady running as well from Carlow.
Did running for the national parliament ever interest you, or was Europe always your sole focus?
Europe was my sole focus. So having been a barrister and having been on a minor stage, so to speak, between the different courts, Circuit High and Court of Appeal and so forth, I always thought perhaps at a certain point in my life I could bring that skill set to another stage or another platform, particularly a political platform, political and legal. And that's why the Europeans was my focus.
Absolutely, and the estimate, isn't it, about 70% of our laws actually originate in Europe. So it's really important that we actually take notice of what is going on in the European Parliament and what our Irish MEPs are doing. Because once you're elected, as you've seen yourself in a short space of time, it's very different to being in a national parliament. You're not just working with your party, you're working in a bloc, and you might have to form alliances in the strangest of places.
Yes. The European Parliament and how politics works there, Paul, is extremely collaborative, and it's less of the them versus us, and I suppose it's less of the argument on the floor of the Parliament, and it's more about the negotiation that happens at the committee level in advance of important votes being taken and in advance of matters being decided. So I'm particularly enthusiastic about the committees that I'm a full member on. Okay. So there's IMCO, Internal Market Consumer Affairs. That's very much focused on business and also artificial intelligence and also the Digital Services Act. And there's a huge degree of law involved in that particular committee. And also I'm on Transport and Tourism, which is vital for Ireland South because our connectivity and our airports and our ports and our roads and all of the investment required in that regard is vital to progress that. And it's also vital, obviously, to look after tourism in Ireland South. An awful lot of the voters who voted for me, an awful lot of the people who are eking a living out in Ireland South or in Ireland South depend on tourism and their individual businesses.
Absolutely. And make an interesting point on the business committee you're on. AI, that is probably the greatest kind of unknown frontier at the moment. It has its advantages and benefits, but there's also things about it that can be a little bit troubling. So is it about trying to get the balance between seeing the positives and the benefits of it, but kind of ensuring that it doesn't become something more, dangerous?
You're so right. Yeah. It's very, very important that AI and digital services, that these aspects of law and of business are progressed and they're developed, but they have to be subject to regulations and rules. Otherwise, they will have negative consequences. And we're already seeing in the area of social media, particularly for, I always say younger children, and then I follow up the sentence by saying, but there's adults who are addicted to social media as well. There's older people who are addicted to social media. So the tech platforms and the tech giants, they have to be robustly regulated. And one of the major things for kids, as we know, is age verification, because age verification is not hardly recognised by the tech giants. And obviously there are loopholes for children to register that they're aged 13, 14, 15 and therefore can have a social media account, but they're nowhere near that age.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Paidi Manning. So,
Thank you.
Mike, is it?
Goramila Mahagut, Das Lauer Clad.
See. No hablo inglés. Where am I going with this? Right. We'll go with count.
Sure.
How are you going to call it?
I am going to call the count as follows. I think we're going to end up with 3 Fianna Fáil seats. I won't tell you the order, because I think that's for bigger brains than mine, but we're also going to end up with obviously a Sinn Féin seat and a Fine Gael seat.
I suppose the order doesn't matter a damn once you get them.
Absolutely. That was one thing that I learned very early on in my campaign, when there were so many seats to be won in Ireland South, and I decided I didn't really care where I came in the ranking of the 5, so long as it was a seat.
Yeah, 100%. Looking at a chap Cleirigh is going to benefit from Michael Doyle's transfers.
Yes.
They're on each other's doorsteps.
Yes.
They're eating out the same pile of votes, which probably annoy a few of the Fine Gael votes, but what can you, Fine Gael people, what can you do? Sinn Féin, any idea who's taking it, Natasha or Anya?
I think at the moment, with the lady from Carlow, who happens to be called Anya Gladney, I think she is likely to jump ahead of Natasha.
Well, she's already ahead of Natasha, sorry.
Yes, but I think she's going to jump and stay ahead.
Yes, sorry,
I think she's going to jump nicely and stay ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I would be, my money would be on Anya at this point.
Yeah. Sinn Féin have done very well in this election.
I think what's going to be interesting, sorry, looking at your list here, is that...
Excuse my handwriting.
No, your handwriting is extremely legible. But the Soc Dems, Patricia Stevenson's distribution is very hard to call, because what I'm hearing from my colleagues on the floor all day today and all day yesterday is that the votes, there seems to be quite a scattergun effect happening when it comes to distribution of these types of votes. They're going everywhere.
Could be a lot of votes that will be non-transferable there when Patricia Stevenson is eliminated.
I'd be surprised at that. But given that she's left-leaning and there's a few left candidates in, it's hard to know.
It is. I mean, obviously, we're probably pretty much agreed that Natasha Newsom-Drennan's, her votes are automatically going to transfer in the main, if not wholly, 100% to Anya Gladney.
Sure as night follows day.
Exactly, yes. And it will be interesting, I suppose, in terms of the second Fine Gael distribution then. As you said, Michael Doyle will benefit Peter Chapclear, but how much is Michael Doyle, the second Fine Gael, or the third Fine Gael seat, if you like, how much is that going to benefit David Fitzgerald, the Fine Gael candidate who's ahead?
Yeah. And again, Catherine in front of him is going to...
And Catherine in front.
She's going to... David's going to leak a few votes to Catherine, which
absolutely
he needs.
Absolutely. Except then geography comes into play, because the two gentlemen, David Fitzgerald and Michael Doyle, are obviously Kilkenny based, and Catherine O'Callaghan is firmly Carlow based.
Yeah, we'll find out soon enough.
It'll be nail biting, as I said.
Your political history. You are an MEP now. You weren't a councillor, you weren't a TD, you came out of, I won't say you came out of nowhere, because you were very high profile.
No, you're absolutely right. I came out of nowhere from the point of view of party politics, or being either an activist on the ground, or being a councillor, or, you know, working with a councillor, working with a TD, or being... I was a background person, and I was one of those background persons that never wanted to be named or never wanted to be credited with being involved in the old kitchen cabinet. So I would have been somebody who worked with candidates over the years when I was in the law library, but I certainly didn't publicise that.
Yeah. You weren't a card-carrying member of Fianna Fáil?
I was not.
Wow.
I certainly wasn't, no. But I quickly paid my subscription, obviously, in March when I got the nomination, and I quickly became the card-carrying member. But to be honest with you, you hear a lot of talk during the election counts about gene pools and about somebody being from a Fine Gael gene pool, or a Fianna Fáil or whatever, or a Sinn Féin one. And I can tell you, whatever about a gene pool belonged to my father, belonged to my mother, whatever, and they weren't party activists either. But Fianna Fáil was always in my DNA. That's probably the best way to describe it. From the time that I actually was a kid, because I believe I was politicised by the Irish language, which might sound a bit odd, But I actually became involved in politics because of the Irish language and because of Carta Civilta, or, you know, the rights of minority language speakers, and the services that were afforded them or not afforded them in the Gaeltacht areas or in other areas like education outside of the Gaeltacht. So I became involved and very interested in the question of Irish language and culture as a teenager, and that continued on, I suppose, throughout broadcasting, because I broadcasted solely as Gaeilge for the first couple of years in RTE, and I would have been in every Gaeltacht constituency listening very hard to all the issues to do with Gaeltacht communities and the defence of the language and the defence of their way of life and the defence of their industry, and to try and get the likes of businesses to go to the Gaeltacht, to be based there. And it's funny, like, that's not neither today nor yesterday. That's a long time ago, decades ago, and yet if we look at the Irish language today and community, Gaeltacht communities, they're still under threat from the point of view of the housing dire need. And I know so many couples, and it's an issue that I'll actually be working strongly on in the European Parliament through the PETI committee, which is the petitions committee. There are so many Daoine Óga, Lána Nóga, young couples who want to actually build and rear their kids trí Gaeilge, as Gaeilge in the Gaeltacht. Fianna Fáil, my party, and myself, we agree, and that obviously we support the Irish language as much as we can and the Gaeltacht areas, but we really need now to deal with this problem of young people not being able to build because of the strict planning laws and not being able to bring up their kids trí Gaeilge. That doesn't just benefit the couple in question, but it benefits the whole region and it benefits the whole country. I mean, the Irish language is probably the most precious prize that we have in this country, and our wonderful culture. If you think about our world-known and world-famed writers, our filmmakers, we have singers, we have so many cultural aspects that all stem, I believe, from the Irish language.
There was a reason I asked you about your political history, because if you haven't been a Carrick member, you weren't knocking on doors before your European election, and this might be your first general election canvassing.
Yes.
How did you find your European election, driving up and down the length and the breadth of a very large constituency, and B, this general election where you're heading down boreens and down back roads, and how did you find it as someone who hasn't done it before?
Absolutely loved it. You see, what people don't know, I suppose, about me is, I mean, I might look like this person who's, you know, very well turned out, and maybe people get an impression that, oh, you know, she likes to take it easy, or she likes to have the easy life. I actually am somebody who works extremely hard. I've only ever been self-employed. I've only ever worked for myself in order to feed my family along with my husband. So when you say driving up and down Bohereens, I have been driving up and down Bohereens for 27 years as a barrister, because effectively I worked on circuit predominantly. So I was in my car most days of the week, and there might have been motorways, but there was a few Bohereens involved as well, where I had to go to fairly, I suppose, isolated courthouses, and I had to go and earn a day's living, and I had to drive back. So I'm very used to the, they call it now the grunt work, you know, the grist and mill. I actually like that. I actually like the reality of having to just get up and go for it and do your best. And I suppose give back a bit as well. I was lucky that my various careers in life have been successful. So in the last 10 years, I've been able to reflect a bit and think, you know, I'm doing okay. I've been lucky enough now to build up a nice practice or a nice business or whatever. And what can I give back? And that really got me thinking about politics, because the more clients that I dealt with through family law and child law, the more I saw desperate problems that really needed to be tackled, and tackled in a solution-driven way, in an informative way, but also in a very empathetic way. It's really important when somebody is explaining their problem to you that you listen. It's not a one-way street. It's not about, oh, here's what I think you should do. I'm going to give you the solution now. You really do have to listen, and listening is half of the solution of the problem. So I've been listening to my clients' problems, and I have to say, very engaged by that. It's not something that I didn't enjoy. In fact, I enjoyed it, and trying to find a solution. So I was used to that, and therefore canvassing, really, I took to it like a duck to water. And I'm also a very, very much a people person. So I'm not just...
I can tell.
Yeah, I'm not just interested in, for example, you doing this podcast or these questions. I mean, I'd like to find out a little bit more about the two of you and you know, exchange a couple of opinions or a couple of views about things. Because I think the more you talk to people, the more you learn. And it's also very humbling as well. There's something very humbling about listening to other people because you get out of your own head and you're not consumed by your own path or your own intentions. So I love listening to people. I like engaging with people. And I do like then, if I'm presented with a problem, I kind of like a challenge. I like to go, right, I'm going to try and solve this for you now. I like that challenge.
I can see why Fianna Fáil approached you. You're built for it.
Yeah, it was kind of unbeknownst, but kind of beknownst. And also, I'm a very immediate, direct person. I don't beat around the bush. I try to be as authentic as I can and as realistic as I can and as truthful to myself, but truthful to the situation as well. So I think in politics, a lot of career politicians, and I don't consider myself a career politician because I've had other careers. I think a lot of career politicians, to their detriment, some of them get very focused on their career as a politician. And as a result, they become very careful or very cautious or maybe a little bit nervous or maybe less adventurous than I am. So I don't have that fear. If something goes wrong, well, you know, I'm happy to say I was wrong or it now is something, it's a problem I have to fix. I don't try and avoid having problems. I don't run out to seek them either, but I don't feel I'm as cautious as a lot of what I would consider career politicians. And I do think politicians nowadays, like every other profession, whether you're a barrister like I was, or whether, I don't know, you're a teacher, a doctor, an engineer, a nurse or whatever, you really have to be with the people that you're trying to help. And by that, I mean, you have to be in the zone. There's no point in going through the motions of doing your job. I really do think you have to give it a little bit extra now because people are under a huge amount of pressure. You don't need me to tell you about all the problems, cost of living, housing, everything that has come up in the recent election. And they really do require engagement and somebody to identify with them, but not in a false way, in a real way.
Can I pick your barrister brain?
Yeah.
Free legal advice. Obviously, we had the trial of, it's completely unrelated to politics, the trial of, civil trial of Conor McGregor and Nikita Hand, and the costs around that have to be determined. And there has been a few tweets by McGregor's Twitter account that have been viewed as defamatory right now. And it said today, I think it was the High Court who that we're seeing that case, are going to examine those tweets before they decide costs. As a barrister, how do you reckon they'll look on those?
Well, far be it from me to give any legal opinion when I haven't been given the brief. That's the first golden rule when you become a barrister. And also, you're never allowed to give a legal opinion if there's already a legal team on board.
My ignorance, that's apologies.
Oh, no. I've no difficulty there, but I would like to say something about that case. And that is, enough is enough. I take my hat off to Nikita Hand.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, who had the courage, and I honestly do not know where she got that courage. I know what that takes because I dealt with sexually abused clients and also clients who were abused financially or mentally or in different ways. And the courage that is required to actually bring yourself to make a complaint, she didn't to the guards, or she did and the DPP decided not to prosecute, but to actually pursue a civil complaint, engage a legal team, leave aside the expense, but it's the sheer trauma of reliving all of that. And I can tell you one thing, guys, a courtroom is the most daunting place you can be if you are a party to the proceedings. It's the loneliest place. You think the count centre is bad, but at least the candidates have their team around them. But in a courtroom, you have your legal team, but you don't have your mammy and daddy and sister and your children like you do down there in the count centre. You don't. You are on your own. And
very vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. And not just from a cost point of view, which you've raised, but also from a credibility point of view. And it is an environment that is so anathema and so different to everybody else's environment. You know, we've all been to a concert, we've all been to the church maybe, we've all been to the shopping centre, we've all been in formal situations maybe at work, but the formality of the courtroom is chilling.
Well, thank you for your opinion. I'm going to pass you back to Paul.
Yeah. Now, just one last question for you, particularly around housing. There is now a EU Commissioner for Housing. Do you think how is that going to help, you know, with the housing challenge that Ireland still faces?
I think it will help because housing has now been put firmly on a European political stage. And it means the housing problems in Spain or Portugal or Ireland or Italy are not just individual problems, but it is an overall problem for the European Union. And unless we do this together, unity and strength, and the emphasis being on the new Commissioner for Housing, unless we start rolling out policies and rolling out plans and legislation to deal with housing on a pan-European basis, it's going to be harder, or we're not going to make as much progress dealing with it as individual countries. For example, the European Investment Bank perhaps can be rigorously investigated and looked at to see if there can be monies freed up to provide money to build more social housing.
And the money is there.
And the money is there. There are other aspects as well to look at. Obviously, the rules around spending by individual states is limited because of our membership of the European Union. Again, perhaps the Housing Commissioner can investigate that and unpick it a bit and say, look, we have a generation or two at this stage of youngsters. We all know them. You're probably some of them. I don't know. I'm not, because I'm at the other end, but they are being locked out of housing. It's a basic need. And so we need to deal with that. Fianna Fáil we've done an awful lot. There's lots more to be done. There's no doubt that we are building more houses than we did 4 years ago before we were in government, or 4.5 years ago. But I do think having the commissioner, I should say, having a housing commissioner in the European Union is going to benefit. Excuse me.
Absolutely. Well, Cynthia Mhurchú, thanks a million for taking the time to chat to us here on the Irish Political Roundup. It's been interesting to get an insight into the work you're doing in the European Parliament and getting your thoughts here on the general election account here in Carlow, Kilkenny. So
it's been a pleasure.
Gurmila Maha.
It's been a pleasure.